On March 14th, Newton voters will decide whether or not to increase their taxes with a debt exclusion override to fund a new or renovated Franklin Elementary School in West Newton. This is question 3 on the special election ballot. If approved, the cost would be $3,500,000 a year, beginning in fiscal year 2030 and last for 30 years.
This building was built almost a century ago. It was built almost half a century before special education was even a thing. It's a dinosaur. It was built for something that is nothing like what public education is now.
Franklin Elementary School was built in 1938 to accommodate 260 students. By 1950, enrollment had doubled capacity, so additions were built.
In 1950, there was a gym and 4 classrooms added, along with some restrooms and storage space. And then in 1953, 3 years after they cut the ribbon on that, they built the kindergarten addition. That stands out. A lot of people think it's actually modular construction. It's certainly a much lesser quality than the original building.
According to Newton's Public Building Commissioner Josh Morse, Franklin School has many deficiencies that should not exist today. For starters, accessibility is a major problem for those trying to move around the school easily.
Derby Street, which is a street right out front that Franklin fronts, sits 14 feet below the main entrance to the school. So to approach the building, you have to navigate a series of stairs or a series of ramps to get up to the main entrance. But you're not done yet. As soon as you get in the main entrance, you are faced with another approximately 6-foot elevation change to get up to the first floor. To your right, you can take an elevator which gets you access to the 3 floors. However, the Franklin School has 6 different interior elevation changes. So what that means is that there are significant portions of the school where a student or a staff member with mobility challenges or a disability simply can't access. Even the portions that they can access are not fully accessible. Restrooms are not fully accessible. We've made improvements where we can, but there are certain portions of the building that it's just not realistic to make simple retrofits on to make it universally accessible.
We had a kindergartner just this year who was temporarily using a wheelchair due to an injury, and just to get from her classroom to the bathroom meant, either being carried up the steps or having to go outside and around and in another door. And, to think that in 2023, that's what we're having to do just to get students where they need to go in the building, to me really makes the point that this is not a sustainable situation for a 21st century school.
Even with the additional spaces, most of the rooms throughout the school are too small for today's standards.
Classrooms are significantly undersized. All of your specials, library, art, music, all significantly undersized. Your gym is undersized quite a bit. The school is lacking breakout areas, special education spaces, student support spaces, staff support spaces.
So staff and students have to make do with what they have.
You're looking at one of the few small group areas, which is really not a small group area. This is the principal's office / conference room / small group area. So we have small group and pull-out areas in the hallways, which is certainly not ideal, but it's the hand they were dealt.
With the lack of space, the basement, originally intended not to be used as occupied space, was revamped to become the library, art room, and music room. But being in the basement has brought other problems that dehumidifiers cannot fix.
The challenge down there is that because it was never intended to be an occupied teaching and learning environment, beyond just the lack of natural light, we've had significant humidity issues over the years, so that is an area in which we've had to do mold remediation many times. We'll see when we get down there. The library is down below. It's kind of the last place or last thing you'd want in a basement area that is very moist, but again, it's the hand we were dealt. Franklin does not have the space.
It's just not space intended for these instructional areas. The teachers do a magnificent job of working with what they have. You'll see how teachers have dressed up a very inadequate space, but it remains a fact that those spaces are not intended for art, music, and library instruction.
Morse adds that the poor design and construction of the kindergarten classroom addition in 1953 has staff and students experiencing a few of Mother Nature's elements inside the classrooms and hallways.
And what that led to was chronic flooding over the years. So Franklin keeps sandbags at the ready to stop the flooding from coming into the kindergarten classrooms in the corridor. Also because that addition was built so inefficiently from a building envelope and from an energy perspective, there's an awful lot of heat loss that occurs there. So when kindergarten starts their day in the cold weather, when the doors open, that flood of cold air can drop temperatures 60 to 70 degrees in a matter of minutes. So those spaces can actually drop to near freezing before the building then tries to recover and get those spaces warmed back up again. So many kindergarten days have been spent in hats and gloves for the staff and students waiting for the temperatures to come back up. We have made efforts to put more heat into those spaces. That certainly has helped, but again, certainly not optimal when you're losing that much heat and then having to pour lots of heat back into it to get the space back up to temperature.
We really need a functional building that allows us to have a comfortable learning environment in all seasons, at all parts of the day, not dependent on whether we had to open the door to let the students in the morning.
Whether the debt exclusion override passes or does not, the school will be either renovated or become a new building, as it cannot continue to be useful as is.
So there's a few different scenarios that we're going to study. The Franklin School site is quite large, and we'll see it when we get out there. There is a large field that is school property. So if it's an addition renovation, obviously the students would have to go elsewhere. So in that scenario, they would go to the former Lincoln Elliott School. What will then be the former Lincoln Elliott School now is the current Lincoln Elliott School. If we decide to do new construction, there's a few different options. The Franklin School could go over to the Lincoln Elliott on Pearl Street while we complete our project, or another option that we could evaluate is the Franklin School stays here, right in the existing building, while we build a new facility elsewhere on the site. And then this building would come down, and this would be an area that would be restored to whether it be parking or field space or playgrounds or a combination of the above.
The project cost is estimated at $61 million, with the city to pay it all. While Franklin did make the Massachusetts School Building Authority's list, the city had to pick either Franklin or Countryside schools to be granted money. Countryside was chosen by the city. On Tuesday, March 14th, Newton's registered voters can decide whether or not to approve Question 3 for a debt exclusion override of an additional $3.5 million per year for 30 years, starting in fiscal year 2030, to fund a new or renovated Franklin Elementary School. More information is available on the city's website. Jen Adams, Newton News, West Newton.